Hi everyone! Today I am going to be demonstrating this color pencil drawing of a magnolia branch. I am using mostly Prismacolor and Polychromos pencils here, but also a few of the Holbein pencils, as well as a couple of Caran Luminance and Derwent Lightfast pencils. And here you can see me jumping right in, starting on this first main flower. I'm working on a paper called Rising Museum Mount Board, which is a really great paper to work on. One of my new favorites. And hopefully in this video, I'm also going to give you some tips for drawing with white on white. Here you can see me doing some color matching. So I have my reference image over to the side, and then I have my swatches of color, and I just kind of hold the swatch next to the reference image and try to pick what looks closest. That's basically as easy as it gets. And then I start just blocking in where I see that color. One of my first tips for drawing white on white is to edit your reference image to increase your contrast a little bit, because when you're drawing white flowers on white, you're basically going to be drawing the shadows, and that's it. So you need to heighten that contrast sometimes so that you actually have something to draw. And I'm just constantly looking over to that swatch to make sure that I am getting the right tones on there. I was using both cool and warm grays here and mixing them together in spots. I'm also using a very light pressure with these pencils. I'm wanting it to be a really nice smooth transition. I don't want any super harsh lines. I did this drawing as a demo over on Patreon, so from time to time you can see me giving those little side instructions there. So that's what you saw me doing on that scrap piece of paper. So the first tip would be changing your reference image to increase the shadows just a little bit so that you have something to draw. The next thing is you're going to want to look at the reference to see what color are those shadows. When you're talking about the gray pencils, most sets of pencils are going to have warm grays, which are going to be a little bit more brownish, like that's what I'm using right there. Or you're going to have the cool grays, which are more of a, like what you would think of as steely gray, or sometimes they have more of a bluish tint. If you're working with Prismacolor, you're also going to have an option of a French gray, which is even more brown than the warm brown. So oftentimes when I'm drawing white flowers, I'm using undertones of greens or pinks or yellows or purples or even blue. And so you just really want to pay attention is what color is this? And it can be a little bit harder to tell when you're dealing with these paler colors. So that leads me to another tip. There are a lot of color picking apps that are available for your phone. I like one called the Color Picker for Artists, and this can just come in really handy when your eyes are struggling to see exactly what color you need in a certain spot. Keep in mind as you're drawing a white flower on white paper, the flower itself isn't usually exactly white. Like if your paper's white, then your flower is going to be a different color than that. So you just have to figure out what color that is and just focus on drawing those shadows. That's the biggest tip. You can't draw white, like with a white pencil on white paper, and have any kind of drawing. You have to draw those shadows to get some shape in the petals. One of the things that I like to do is to start with the darker shadows and then work around from there, just because it's easier to see. Here I'm coming in with more of a peachy color in this center, more of a peachy beige color, and then working around. Using the shadows in the right places is going to, like I said, give some shape to these petals and hopefully give them almost a scoop kind of effect. And that's going to be really important for the overall effect of the drawing as well. I spent a lot of time on these first layers, just making sure I got everything right. And then you're going to see me blend over with solvent just to smooth this color out. And then the second layers went really quickly after that. Just darkening up that center a bit more. I ended up even putting, I think, a little bit of black in the center. And here I'm coming through blending with solvent. I was using a brand new paintbrush to blend this out. I wanted to make sure that I didn't have any other color on here that could possibly get on that white, and just being very careful to keep that nice and clean. And then you don't see it in the video, but I let that dry for a good 15 minutes, maybe a half an hour before I came through to add the second layers. And just worked back over everything, just going back to that reference image to see what I maybe needed to darken. And then I was going over with my white pencils just to smooth everything out really nicely. I especially like using the Prismacolor white and the Derwent Drawing Chinese white for that purpose. They're both really nice and soft, kind of creamy pencils that do a really good job of just pulling everything together. And there you can see that flower from a distance. Sometimes when I'm working up close, it's a little bit hard to see what it's going to ultimately look like. And then I basically followed that same process on the rest of the drawing. There were some darker shadows in the top two flowers that weren't in the bottom flower. And now I'm jumping in to start working on the leaves, which are my favorite part of any drawing. I really like to draw these. And I started off each of these leaves by using my Polychromos May Green pencil to indent the paper where I wanted the veins to be. And you can indent your paper with either an embossing tool, which is going to leave the indented area white or whatever color your paper is, or you could even indent with a white sharp pencil. And in this case, I decided to indent with this May Green because the undertones, or the tones that I was seeing in the veins, or the color of the veins themselves, was more of a greenish yellow color. So I just indented with that pencil. Just press down hard enough to make an indentation, and then when you come over those areas, you can see here pretty clearly when I just go straight over those areas, that indentation stands out. And just a really nice, easy way to create veins in the leaves. Then when I come over and dissolve the pigment with the solvent, it's going to blend those veins out some so they're not quite as obvious and prominent, but you can still see them under there, and that just creates a really nice natural look for your leaves. So that's a technique that I use over and over and over, and I talk about it all the time. I just think it's a really great way to get those veins in there. Trickiest part about leaves to me is knowing exactly how much detail to put in. Just usually hundreds of tiny veins running through these leaves, and I usually will just draw the most prominent ones. If I'm working on a larger scale, then I can add more detail to the leaves, but something like this where the leaves are not the main subject. I just want to get the impression of those veins in there. I don't have to draw every single bit of it. After I blend it all out with solvent, then I come back through and add my second layers. This is where I really add a lot of texture and detail. You can see me using the electric eraser to just basically create depth and texture, because that electric eraser will pull up the top layer of color and expose those brighter colors that are underneath there, and also give me some surface area for my brighter pencils to stick. So just creates a splotchy sort of textural look on my leaves that I also really like. So those two techniques in combination, indenting the paper with the sharp pencil and then coming over in my second layers with the electric eraser, together, really I like the effect that I can get with those two techniques in combination. And here I'm getting ready to start work on the first bud, and these buds are really what draw me to this drawing to begin with. I like the coloring on them. I like that they have almost a glow to them, and I used that Polychromos green gold pencil to create that look, and I was really happy with the way it turned out. I was using some reddish browns and then also that green gold, and almost just looks like it's glowing. I was using a Polychromos burnt sienna and also Venetian red from Derwent. It was Derwent Drawing Venetian red, and then also a terracotta from Prismacolor. And then in this section I was using a lot of artichoke from Prismacolor and a little bit of the Holbein pencil willow. And then I worked a few different greens to try to get that shadow in before I figured out what I was happy with, which I think was just the artichoke. The leaves themselves had a lot of olive green from Prismacolor and also kelp green. And then I was also using olive and moss greens from Holbein. Holbein Pencils, that's a brand that I have never really used before, but I did buy, I don't know, 10 or 12 of their green pencils just to try them out and really like them. Of the 10 or 12 that I purchased, there are definitely some colors that I will probably never really use, but particularly that olive green and moss green, those are just two colors that I really end up using a lot, I think. I think there's one called Ivy that I also like a lot, but I've only used them in a couple drawings, so I need to experiment with them a little bit more. Ordering some more colors from that line. They should get here any day. The entire set of the Holbein pencils is very expensive, so I just like to buy a few open stock and try them out before I make that kind of an investment, which is what I always recommend to people when I get that question asked to me, which brand of pencils should I buy? I always recommend buy a few open stock before you spend the money on a big set, just to make sure you like them. And now finally I'm working through on the branch, and that's the last thing that I worked on, and I used the exact same colors in the branch that I had been using in the flowers, just the grays and the browns. And I worked through the entire thing and then blended over with the solvent, and then came back and added my final details there. And here is my finished drawing. If you have any questions about this one, I am happy to answer them in the comments section. And if you're interested in learning even more, I have the 7-part tutorial available over on Patreon for immediate access for all 7 of those lessons. So check that out if you're interested. And otherwise, I will see you here next week with another video on YouTube. All right, bye everybody.